Peace and respect to you all. Welcome to Demolished Doctrine, the beginning of the end of religions. Our third time return guest, Mr. Tobin Templeman, who has his own channel going on where he does some original. You do some covers too, right? Though you don't do only original things, but you do some original things. Yes.
No, I do no covers. Everything is
Wow.
Is my creation. I got bored with doing covers a long time ago, and now I'm on to making concept albums. What I'm sharing with y'all now is my concept called Truth Claims, but there's actually another project that me and my wife have been working on for some time that is also it's called Lizzie's Pretend Friend, which that's a whole different concept than Truth Claims. It's another album, but yeah.
What's the overview, the idea behind a series called Truth Claims? Can you give us like the big idea?
Yes, I am making truth claims. They're what the truth that I see.
And actually, that's interesting because today we thought we'd talk about epistemology.
Mm-hmm.
So happy coincidence. All right. So the idea in epistemology, in my view, is to steel man another person's position and better understand how they are thinking about things so that my brain can better understand their brain. So more entanglement or more overlap is what I really want from these kinds of conversations. And I'm afraid that epistemology has kind of in the last decade or so kind of gotten a bad name for itself because people who say that they're performing epistemology are actually not. That's not what they're doing. Popular epistemology is people using a questioning method only to cause doubt in the other person. Now that's limiting epistemology and outside of its overall intended purpose or usefulness, if you will. But I want to return back to not just casting doubt in someone else's mind, but actually trying to understand where they're coming from, and maybe I can express some of where I'm coming from, and we'll understand each other better.
Right on. I understood epistemology a little bit differently. To me, epistemology is how you know things.
Right.
And it's not what you know. It's like, where did you learn this from? How do you know it to be true?
Mm-hmm. No, you're absolutely right. And that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about. But what I was referring to as misuse of epistemology is how Anthony Magnabosco is using it and how Dr. Boghossian suggested a person might use it to cause a person to doubt their own belief systems, which can be very damaging in their life if you don't have something to replace it with, by the way. To cause person doubts about their perception of reality without helping them establish something that is better replacing that is very damaging to a person. And frankly, I think it's cruel.
I don't see how there's any pain or any kind of suffering through discovering what you know is true. If you're questioning, you're just merely thinking. There's no harm. And the discovery that you may be thinking something false would lead a person to know what is true, therefore being able to make better decisions or feel better about one's position on whatever subject it is.
So you take a healthy attitude about it and you look at it in a healthy way. But the first thing I'd say is not everyone is healthy. Okay? Some people are unhealthy and they need whatever reality they cling to survive. Now, that may not be the case in you. I think it's not the case in me, but it's not universally true that it's everyone feels that way and thinks that way about it. Okay, so yes, it can be damaging to those that are fragile. Okay, and you might not be that kind of fragile person, but that doesn't mean that no one else is fragile. And beyond that, I think there's a difference between investigating how a person knows something and making them think about better ways to think about what they know and investigate and learn about things they might hold that are false, and just causing sudden doubt in people in an aggressive manner in order to destroy what belief systems they do cling to. I think there's a difference there. And I can't respect what Anthony Magnabosco does, because first of all, he's an outright liar, saying that he wants the truth. He does not want the truth. He wants to destroy other people's beliefs about the truth. That's not the same thing at all.
I don't see where you're getting this from. Like,
Well,
Anthony Magnabosco, I'm sure I have kept up with him quite a bit. Like, everything that he releases, I watch.
Mm-hmm. And you don't see any bias in what he's doing.
Any biased? No, because the questions are directed in a way of, how do you know this to be true?
Mm-hmm.
All of the questions are linked to that one discovery. It's not to show somebody that their belief is wrong. It is merely to get to the point of, how do you know?
Okay, so would you object, Tobin, would you object if a Christian said, I already believed in God, now I've read the Bible, and now I know more about the God that I already knew existed? Is there anything like logically wrong with that?
I'm sorry, run it by me one more time.
When someone presupposes something and then they investigate it based in that presupposition, a pre-existing belief in something, isn't it biased? And aren't they only self-confirming when they find evidence that tells them that they were right in the first place?
If somebody presupposes something to be true,
mm-hmm.
and they find something that backs up their belief,
mm-hmm.
then yes, it is self-confirming. Yes.
Right. Okay. So if Anthony Magnabosco had a series called How to Make Atheists, should I still think his questioning is honest?
Is that something that he actually has?
Yes,
a
he
series?
Does. See, he has a presupposition. He has an agenda.
I don't know that to be true. I would have to.
I'll link it to you.
And even if it is true,
mm-hmm.
the series is called How to Make an Atheist.
It's something that means that.
Which is Peter Prigozhin's book, How to Make
mm-hmm.
an Atheist, which is where Anthony picked up the idea about epistemology and then
Right.
adding the street element to it.
Sure.
And yeah, I am unaware of.
In his teaching series, he refers many times to Dr. Boghossian's book.
Yes.
Which is entitled How to Make Atheists.
Yes.
Which is supposed to be instructional, teaching people how to ask questions that will cause doubt in the minds of others in order to accomplish the goal that they become an atheist.
Okay.
So I think I should accept that Anthony Magnabosco, adopting and applying in an interesting way Dr. Boghossian's methodology, is certainly also trying to make atheists of people. So when he claims, I just want to know the truth, that is an outright lie.
I don't think so. Because I don't think that is the way it is really approached. I don't think that is the way it is
I can show you videos where he talks to people and says, I just want to know the truth. I don't have any biases about this topic. I just want to understand what you believe so that I can investigate what is true. He is not doing that.
It's not how he's not looking for what is true. He is looking for the person's how they know it to be true. And that's all that's really trying to be relayed through the videos is these people's story and how they know it to be true. There's no.
So I think we've done a good job of identifying what is the difference between applying epistemology to someone's mind and to their thought processes and investigating what we know. That's epistemology. And I've expressed, even though you don't agree with me, that I think there's dishonest investigation in epistemology, and I gave an example. You don't have to agree with me that Anthony Magnabosco is dishonest. That's fine. That's absolutely fine. But I think you've identified what you mean by epistemology, and I have too, and it's the same definition. Is it the same definition?
Oh, I'm sorry. I got caught reading the little banners right there. What was that?
I said, do you and I have the same definition of epistemology, that is investigation of knowledge claims?
Yes. Yeah. To investigate how you know something.
So a good way for us to kick this off is if I assert something that I believe is true.
Okay.
And then you can pick it apart all you like, and we'll discuss it.
All right.
And then if you wanted to take turns, we could flip the script and do it the other way around. So I'll be the target in this one. I'll make myself under scrutiny. And I invite you to be, serious. I invite you to be very, very thorough about this. I really do. After all, if something I'm believing can't be true in reality, that would be a nice thing to know. And maybe I can replace that something with something that can be true in reality. Okay. I think a good beginning assertion might be something like, I believe there are alien human beings who never have lived on this earth and never will, and they have an established society they intend to invite us into.
Okay. You think that there is an alien species that's never lived here?
Alien human beings who have never lived here.
There's alien beings that have not lived here, but they're human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And they're on their way here.
Well, that's hard to say if they're on their way here, or even what that would mean. If a civilization could do something like fold space, I don't even know how I would even say that. But I'm claiming that I believe that there is a promise given to us that we get invited to become part of their society.
Well, how do you know that to be true, though? What made you think that this is something?
Okay, so indicators that I have that this is true include every standard religious story from ancient days, from this earth, where those stories are telling that very thing.
Okay, so you're using ancient texts from distant languages. How do you know that you have the correct interpretation of these ancient texts? So I'm sure you're talking about further than any even Christianity, going back as far as like the Egyptians and their
Further back and much broader spread than that.
Yeah.
I mean, to the extent it would include the Aboriginal Australians, who separated from the rest of humanity apparently some 18,000, maybe as little as 15,000 years ago. And we have no indicator that they had a spoken language or written language at the time, and that they've only had spoken language for a little bit over 7,000 years. But yet they have this same story. So I find it all over the earth that there's even a tribe of Native Americans that call themselves the Star Children, and saying that their fathers were from the stars. I mean, it goes pretty broad and wide.
That can even be found in the Native American history with our, what is known as the Indians that were here. Yes, mm-hmm. I've heard stories of, yes. But how do we know that the stories are similar? Because the stories are being told and passed through different cultures, and each culture is adding their own flavor to it in a way.
Well, that's entirely possible, where those land masses were attached when language was developed. But when the language hadn't been developed and those land masses split apart, separating the people, there's no way they would have had to convey a complex idea to each other. So I default to say that they did not share the stories, but instead they were told the stories separately.
You're talking about events that happened before our language, before mm-hmm. humans had the ability for language.
The separation, right? The separation event, yeah, would have been pre-language in some cases, yes.
Okay. So how would those stories be able to pass down to these generations that were after the language? How would they been able to get these stories articulated to where the events could actually be relayed and passed down.
That's precisely my point. It can't be.
Okay.
So the idea of passing it down doesn't work.
Right.
However, if there's a singular source able to tell the story repeatedly in whatever time frame needed, that's a cogent theory.
That's a strange noise. Did you hear that?
You're listening to that? I am in the basement under a restaurant. That is a mop bucket across a tile floor. That's what you're hearing.
The clickety clacks. Right on. Okay.
He's getting ready to close up shop for the day.
Right on. Cool. All right. Okay. So we're trying to get to how you know that it is of an alien race.
Mm-hmm.
When you say alien race, like
I didn't say alien race at any time. I said alien human beings.
Alien human beings. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a little bit lost. What are we trying to pinpoint down to know what it is?
I think I understand the spirit of your question or your objection, whichever you like to call it. How could I possibly verify that even if these stories have a lot of overlap, first of all, that they come from a singular source, and how much overlap is there? Is there any differences? And how would I know that it comes from some being or some human beings off of the planet? So there's two things to verify there. Which one you want me to answer first?
Okay. How do we know it's even a singular source?
Okay. I believe if there is enough definition within a story that it's the same story. You know, if all of the key elements, which number in the hundreds, are existent in every one of the stories, it's difficult to call them different stories. Okay. So the question becomes for me personally, because eventually this becomes not evidence, but persuasion. It's whether or not a person is persuaded by the evidence more than the evidence itself. After all, someone might see 3 points of evidence, become convinced. Someone might need 10,000 points of evidence to become convinced of a thing. You never know. So for me personally, I was persuaded when I saw that there was only overlap and no differences within the certain reading frame that I've adopted. Okay. So how many points of evidence am I seeing? Literally thousands. That each of the aspects, all the major topics and aspects of all the stories are all intermingled throughout all the stories.
But see, I had asked something earlier very similar to what I would like to ask right now. But how could you tell the difference between it being a single source and it being stories that are just being heard and then being passed down, and then everyone is just making their own, bring it into their own culture and making the story their story, and that's why there is a similarity in these stories.
Okay. You're going to end up having to argue with Matt Dillahunty on this one. I'm going to use that as an example in just a minute. But before I do, and good luck arguing with Matt. If if there is nothing but overlap, although what you just said is true, on a singular landmass, it makes sense that, for instance, Judaism, or all the Abrahamic religions for that matter, borrowed from Zoroastrianism, borrowed from what?
Why would it have to stay to one landmass? We know that people.
No. In this example, no. Hold on. I'm answering your question very directly. You said, could they have just passed it on from other cultures? Yeah, sure, as long as they know each other exist. But 10,000, 15,000 years ago, everybody thought they were on an island. Everybody thought they were the only part of the earth above water. Everybody thought that. There was no communication between the Americas and, say, Australia. They didn't know each other existed, you see. So, yeah, you can pass stories from one culture to another, but you have to know the other culture exists.
Yes, but
okay,
it could also be very likely that even though they may have been stuck in their little corner of the earth, that they could there plenty of people get ostracized from communities, and maybe a group or a person detaches from that and goes on. The tides have these currents, and you can be on water to float, and you could be taken to another land. So
I think the chances of catching an uncharted current across an ocean when sailing at that time was following the shoreline and the stars by night and not venturing toward the end of the ocean, because you understand that people, or many people, thought that the horizon was the end of the planet. You understand that? So they did not sail toward the horizon. That was generally not accepted.
But wouldn't it not be possible that a person who was fishing got caught in a current and could be taken far away?
Sure, it's possible. Was he fishing with his woman? And were they very young? Were they very young and healthy?
I mean,
let me point out all the multipliers there. First, they were rejected from their society. Second, they already had a boat, or they built one immediately. Third, they were young and fertile, virile. Fourth, there was a couple in order to start that new tribe, so say tribe, on some other landmass. Fourth, they caught a current that would take them there when people weren't looking for currents that led them straight out to sea.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it could happen. I have played in the ocean, and there's been many times where I was out there and got brought much further from where I had started.
Oh, sure. You can, that can definitely happen, but your first reaction, but I think a human being's first reaction 15,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, would have been paddle immediately toward shore or die.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But we know that's not true today.
I mean, there's plenty of people who get caught off guard with these undertows and these currents to this day.
Sure. Absolutely true. Then on top of all of those other qualifiers, those other 5 qualifiers, they also traverse the distance without being sunk, and they survived not only possible bad weather, but they also were there short enough time that whatever supplies they could pack in whatever amount of time in whatever size boat lasted until they got. I'm just saying there's a lot of things we're assuming to say, well, what if they got kicked off England and they went over to Australia?
There is this is known to be true, that primates have crossed great distances because of very bad hurricanes, and
Okay.
primates were on top of debris that got blown into the waters, and they just got on top of it, and it carried them to different places. There's
That's that's
that's
absolutely fine. Do you think you're near as tough as your common monkey?
there are some fascinating stories that um, tell of the human condition being able to handle extremely Australia doesn't exist. Yeah. Uh,
Well, it does exist, but it's upside down on the bottom of the disc. They all wear jetpacks, you know.
um, but yeah, there are examples of it not even needing to have the uh, the knowledge of building boats and currents and all that, and animals being distributed out into other places of the world.
Oh, sure, that can happen.
But that's why I'm not seeing how it could be a single source in
Hmm.
which all these stories come from just one single source,
Hmm.
because nature has a way of dispersing. uh
Let's say that we give your theory a 50-50 chance on every split of it. Does that sound fair?
well, it is what it is. It's
No, no,
there's no 50-50
it's a
on it. It's
plausible theory, but let's give them, dude. I think you need to realize how generous I'm being, saying someone got cast out to sea and 50% chance of living. It can't be near 50% chance of living when you're unprepared, cast out to sea, drugged by a current and everything else you mentioned, drugged by a storm. That's not a 50-50. I'm going to give you a 50-50. I'm being generous here.
okay.
So let's split it by 50% chance every time there's another requirement. Does that sound fair?
There's another requirement.
Sure. Another requirement for the whole theory to work out. Like, for instance, there has to be a male and female. That's one requirement.
It's not even really a theory, though. It is what it
If you
is.
want to propose it as something to refute what I'm saying, then it has to make better sense than what I'm already saying. I want to show you that I think it doesn't.
Okay, so what we're um what we're talking about right now still
Mm.
is the chances of a person being on water and being able to survive the whole
Not a
happening.
person. No, that wouldn't work. One person doesn't reproduce and make a civilization.
Well, oh, if there's already people on the other spots of the earth.
That's interesting. Okay, let's go with that then. They don't need to make a civilization. It could be a singular person.
Well, I mean, we're talking about this person who is surviving, or people. I have no problem saying that there would be more than one person. Um, I think it to be true that it has happened many times that there have been storms that have carried animals, period, to different places on the
Sure.
earth.
How many talking animals, though?
What was that?
How many talking animals have made a journey like that we can show is
Well,
true?
well, talking, being able to communicate. How many animals do
Well, not
that?
just communicate in complex ways and translate complex ideas, not just talking. It has to be really good communication.
I think there is communication between animals.
Sure.
The animals have their ability to communicate.
What's the simplest story that you know of that's popular? Let's take like a children's tale. Name a children's tale.
Come here. Come here. Come here. Come here. Ah.
I can't see the cover of that.
It's a Grimm's Fairy Tales.
Grimm's Fairy Tales. Pick one. Pick the simplest one, please.
The Three Spinsters.
Do you already know the story? You could give us an overview? I don't know that story.
No, I don't. Actually, that's probably
pick
a bad
one you
example.
do know.
Okay.
Pick one you do know.
A fairy tale. A fairy tale.
Sure.
Let's go with Goldilocks.
Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Okay.
Yeah.
So in Goldilocks and the Three Bears, a child goes out in the woods exploring, right? Discovers a house, and discovers sleeping arrangements within the house. Count 3. Bowls of porridge. Count 3. Chairs. Count 3. And a table. Okay. And we can assume everything that's attached to that, things like some way to cook porridge, things like that. Okay. The bears return home and chase the little girl away. And what would you say is the overall lesson of Goldilocks and the Three Bears?
It's probably not polite to go into somebody's home and start messing around with their stuff.
Okay, so I would call that an example of socially acceptable moral acts and immoral acts, if that's fair.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think that's a baseline of the story and a baseline of the overall idea. I think that's great. Okay, lemurs are able to communicate with each other. In fact, we've found lemurs able to describe color of clothing of a major article, like say a jacket or a pair of pants or shirt, of human beings coming near their tribe. And they're also able to communicate how many human beings are coming toward their tribe, to a limited number, of course. So they're able to say, oh, there's 3 humans. One of them's wearing red, one of them's wearing white, one of them's wearing black, and they're coming this way. We need to scatter. Okay. Can you give me what you think in complexity of story, how the lemurs did compared to Goldilocks and the Three Bears?
Are you... The 3 lemurs were communicating in order to keep themselves safe from the humans. They're being protective of themselves.
Right. So survival technique. It's a good survival technique, sure, for the whole tribe. In fact.
I'm sorry, I'm being asked something from my wife.
No. Go ahead. It's fine. It's fine.
I'm sorry. We're good now.
Okay. So I was asking you to compare the complexity of 3 people are coming this way wearing certain colors, and we need to leave to protect ourselves as a survival technique, versus all of the described situation and the implied moral lesson in Goldilocks and the Three Bears.
You want me to apply the
Just asking which one's more complex.
Oh, which one's more complex? Oh, I wouldn't consider either of them complex. I think those are pretty basic stories, little narratives that we just discussed. To me,
So observations about natural surroundings is just as complex as moral lessons.
see, I don't find morality complex. I don't think I often think people will overcomplicate philosophy
Well,
and
let's flip that around and see
morality.
if you still think the same thing. Can you
Okay.
imagine picking up a child's book that said there was a red car, a black car, and a white car? You should leave.
In a children's book,
Can you
I
imagine
read it,
that being entertaining to a human infant child?
and that sentence would be the only
That's it. That's the whole
sentence in the
story.
book. That's the whole story.
Mhm.
Well, depending on how young the person is, it would probably only keep their attention for like seconds.
Why would it be different? Why would that not be a riveting story to a child? Say the child's 5.
Well, because it does not have all the elements of a story. We're talking about a sentence and a story.
Mm-hmm.
A story
Well, I
is
still see a sentence in a story in hand signals and hand twitches and vocalizations of the lemur indicating those things. That story, 3 humans come this way, leave. One of them's black, one of them's white, and one of them's red. Is every bit the story that I just told to the child? Why wouldn't a 5-year-old find that to be a riveting story?
because it doesn't have all the elements of a story. There's more details, and often stories have a problem that is an obstacle for the characters in the book to overcome.
Right. And often used as a lesson to teach the reader, especially in the case of fairy tales.
Yeah.
Okay. So there are more elements in Goldilocks and the Three Bears. And a child might find the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears interesting and probably wouldn't find the lemur story interesting due to complexity and how challenging the story is, that the person has something to detail, something to figure out about the story. But you said that they're about equivalent.
Now that I'm understanding this more, what you're getting at is our lemur story is just a quick, there's only so many details that are put into the story. It's not fully fleshed out. The Goldilocks story has a beginning, a middle, and an ending. There is more complexity to the story. Therefore, it is more entertaining to a child to read.
Sure.
Yes.
Sure. And what's the
Yes.
moral lesson within the lemur community in the message of the lemurs we need to leave?
The moral story, the story about the lemurs, it needs more details in it to be able to really talk about what the moral situation is in that story. Yeah, I mean, it would have to be imagined. It would have to be told in that story.
Now, to be fair, we don't know much about lemur language or chimpanzee,
Right.
or grizzly bear, or many other things that do communicate at some rudiment. Dogs communicating at some rudimentary level. We don't know their languages very well right now, and there might even be a moral lesson that we can't sense in the story of the lemurs, but presently we can't sense it.
Yeah, I'll go with that. Yes.
Okay, so what's probably the best communicator on the planet aside from human beings in body actions and in formations, structures of several individuals working cooperatively, and in vocalizations is probably the bottlenose dolphin.
Yeah, they are pretty intelligent. Although
Or possibly whale song,
elephants,
whales.
Whales too. Yeah, I don't know how complex their language is and all that they know. Uh, yeah, there's right now, there's no way that I know in order to gain that kind of information. I think there's definitely some people who are very interested in that and are doing that very said project right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we are. We're working on that sort of thing. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But let's assume the best of the animals that aren't human beings and the most complex stories that they possibly could tell. And I think that a child's fairy tale like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, as far as humans are concerned, is an extremely simple story. Now, if I had to put a percentage just off the cuff of the complexity of Goldilocks and Three Bears versus the complexity of the Hindu religion, I think it's not fair to call them equivalent.
I would agree with that. Yes, there are many more pages in the Vedas than there is in Goldilocks. Yes.
And what about the ideas and the like the moral suggestions, the philosophical questions, the claims of things that are just outrageous? What about all that complexity?
I think it was used in and applied much like people have done with the Goldilocks story, and I think I could equate those two to being on the same level. I mean, you're still at the end of it talking about how you think, what is right and wrong.
Sorry, Big Zebra wrote something. I have to share this with everybody.
Okay.
Oh, wait, I missed it.
Mixed literally is fish.
It's true. He's right. He's right. Two bears meant no, wait a minute. Three bears mentioned in the Bible. But that's aside from the point. Okay.
Yeah, I know it's. I think I know what story you're talking about. Yeah.
Okay. So what I'm trying to say overall, and then I'd like a turn if it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm trying to say overall is due to the extreme complexity of these stories and the amount of overlap that is involved in them, it's hard for me to accept that some person got pushed out to sea by tidal movements or patterns of water flow or by extreme air movement, and that happened so many times that they survived being translated so that all parts of the planet had this happen to each other part, so that they could all have the stories, and the stories so complex that it would require spoken language and understanding of deeper ideas and thoughts, such as philosophy, in order to make the claims that these ancient religions make. And I'm not saying that's impossible. I just like to compare it, all of that, to a singular source just said it. That only requires one being knowing the story, able to tell it in several different ways to different people. And that ain't requiring much.
Well, where you see overlap, I see inconsistency in all the
That would be
stories.
interesting. So that's a good claim for me to investigate with you. Could you name an inconsistency between the ancient religions that assign value to? Because we have to say about what kind of religion assign value to a progenitor god.
I'm not sure what progenitor means.
Fatherhood. A father god. So of all the ancient religions that claim there's a father god, you can compare any two of them together that you like, and you said that there are discrepancies. I'm asking you to point out some discrepancy.
Well, that you've picked out a perfect one whenever you talk about the Hindu ideology with the Vedas. They have multiple gods. Like it's much like the Greek pantheon.
Well, let's just stick to one. Let's not muddy the waters with too much information.
But they do not have the same. There's not a single God concept.
Okay, so there's not a single God concept.
So that would be inconsistent with Christianity or the Abrahamic religions.
Okay, does the Abrahamic religion ascribe value to the idea of a singular creator?
It depends on which denomination.
No, it doesn't.
You're talking about, because we're talking about the Abrahamic, which I understand that as
all the Abrahamic, right?
Judaism, Islam, and Christianity,
right?
And there is inconsistency within just those three that came from the Abrahamic stories.
So, which of those three claim that there is not a singular creator God?
The Vedas, the Bhagavad Gita.
So in the Bhagavad, I can't even pronounce that. In the Vedas, there's no mention of Brahma.
No, Brahma is part of the Vedas.
Is Brahma more than one god?
There's also Shiva is one that comes right to the top of my head.
You're talking about incarnations. And the reason you have a different name is because it's a different god. Is there more than one Brahma?
I don't know.
There is only one Brahma. Brahma is the creator. There is one creator God in the Vedas.
I think there are other gods. The way, from my understanding, there are other gods that also have powers in this world, and
there is.
Right.
So let's keep going. Let's go down the list. What are the next three under Brahma?
I don't know if there is an under.
They're manifestations of, I'm going to use the word under, though they're not literally lower. They're equivalent. I get that. Well, what are the three manifestations of Brahma?
Brahma is the one that has the elephant head, if I'm thinking correctly.
That's Ganesha.
Ganesh. Okay. Right. But see, there's the inconsistency. There is
where?
That is the inconsistency, is there are multiple gods and there's not just one God. And
you can claim that. I'm asking you to show it. I already said there's one creator God in Hinduism. You said there was differences in God between Hinduism and the Abrahamic religions, I said both Christianity, Islam, and Judaism all believe there is a singular creator God. So does Hinduism. So we're looking for differences.
Right. And that is why I was mentioning there. We've found three. There was Shiva, Ganesh, and Brahma, and I know there's more. I'm pretty sure. I'm fairly confident there's more that are a
The
part
first
of those.
manifestations of Brahma come threefold and are the three major gods that are not the creator within Hinduism. Or do you want to go to a religion that you're more familiar with?
Well, see, the thing is, though, what we're trying to get down to is to be able to know that it started from a singular story, and
Right.
it's not just an amalgamation of many stories that have been. I mean, before there was even language, we were still.
Mm-hmm.
There was a point in times where we're communicating. There's.
Sure.
I can even communicate with people who do not speak of the same language. I've had to work with people of different languages, and we find ways to communicate.
And
There's
the internet's pretty handy for that, by the way.
Oh yeah, actually, one of the people that has left me comments on my videos that I've been putting out lives
Mm-hmm.
over in Spain, and we've been going back and forth. He puts out a video, and we've been talking, and it's all because of the translator.
Right.
I probably talk like a 4-year-old or a 6-year-old in Spanish. If I was to sit here and to try to put together sentences, it would be horrible.
Well, you
But
should have to ask the other person if that's how they perceive your sentence structure, because I
yeah,
doubt that's true.
but yeah, that it is pretty cool, that translator. It has made it to where we've had full-blown conversations on things. Like, we started talking about the vaccines and how Spain was dealing with it and things like that. Like, I had a conversation with a person that I would not have had the capability some years ago. But if we're talking about being able to tell and to know it is true that it is coming from a single story.
Well, let me present an argument here.
Okay.
If I find a layer in the rock of 10 basic life body forms, and it's buried pretty deep, right, compared to the same rock layer, on other parts of the earth that could have a lot stacked on it, then I can say that layer of rock is old, and it has the 10 major body plans, and we call that the Cambrian layer. Okay. Now, if I go somewhere else and I find another rock on top of that, over top of the Cambrian layer, and it's got like placard fish and some simple crustacea, and say it's got I don't know, that sort of, I could name some stuff, but it'll get boring. And I can add to my knowledge. Now, if I find a trilobite, does that in some way take away from other forms from the Cambrian layer? I don't think it does. In fact, what we're doing is we're adding to the knowledge, we're building knowledge as we go forward, able to collect information from more and more parts of the earth. Now, you don't have a problem with that theory, do you?
We're talking about geology and being able to find fossils.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Would you say that the more I find the same thing and the more complex it is, the more confirmation that I have?
If you find something that is there, it is. Yeah, and you could have a confidence that you found it there. I mean,
Right.
yeah.
Like, but if I found rock layers getting closer and closer to the surface with simpler and simpler things in it and no complex life, that would be speaking against the theory of stratigraphy and its confirmation of evolution, right? If everything got simpler.
I don't think so.
Well, then we're going to have a hard time arriving at you and I talking on the internet. If everything got simpler, the less far you dig down. If things got to a maximum complexity at say just after the Cambrian explosion, say during the Devonian, that was the most complex life got, and everything we dug up was simpler and simpler than that, then we're never going to get to you and I talking on the internet. That's just not going to happen.
How are the things more complex, or why are the why is it seen as something that is complex just because it's been fossilized?
It's not more complex because it's been fossilized. It's more complex because it has more systems, more organs, 10-part eyeballs, 11-part reproduction in a cascade system. It's more complex, literally. It doesn't just, I mean, I think a lot of men would like it if they could just drink beer, get fatter, and split in half and make a son. That would be awesome. But we're too complicated to make offspring that way. We got more complicated ways of doing it. So I think it's evidence that if something gets more complicated over time, then it's been gathering data. In the case of evolution, it's been gathering data from its natural environment. Okay. And the more places that I find it, the more confirmation that I have. Now, why wouldn't that be true in religion studies?
You're comparing fossils and how you think of the fossil record and how the comparison of how people look at religion?
No, I'm talking about the formation of religion, and I'm comparing it to evolution.
It's as it's getting more added to the story as it goes. Yes, which is one of the reasons why I think it is more likely that it was just a story that gets added onto it, and it goes to different parts of societies, to different lands, not
Okay.
just by water, but people traveling along the lands and going to different spaces and trying to trade and do all those things. I mean, we were not a stationary animal. We were not a stationary species. We're wandering out, much
No,
like
I'm not.
all
I'm
the
not
rest of them.
returning to the other argument.
Okay.
I'm not
Well,
returning to the first half of the conversation.
but where I'm trying to go is that we're traveling. The species is traveling throughout the earth in many, by different means, and stories are being told, and it grows and forms and becomes much like what you're talking about with um, evolution, with the allele changes that happen over time, very small changes that happen over time.
Mm-hmm.
And in that way, I think I can see the comparison in that
Well, that's all
it
that
is
I
just
meant
small.
is that collecting information and increasing in complexity over time and finding this in several places where where they all work together as a singular idea is confirmation and not denial.
It is confirmation and not denial that there is a singular story.
That there is a singular story.
There's not, though.
Okay, can you find me a difference between two of the religions that, because so far you haven't.
Well, that was the whole talk about Shiva, Ganesh, and
Not
Brahma.
Ganesh. Ganesh doesn't
Well,
belong on that list, and you can't include Shiva with Brahma.
the war goddess? See,
I mean, we have to stick to their actual religion. We can't switch it around.
right, and I'm not going to be able to tell their story. I have a very basic understanding of the Hindu religion, but still, from my understanding of it, these are different gods that
Would you like to pick a different
have
religion?
stories. I mean, if we talk about Christianity, I mean, there are people who see the Trinity as, the Holy Ghost, the Father, and then the Son. And then you have some that think all of those are one thing and
Yeah.
not three individual things.
Well, I'm also not trying to get into different sects of Hinduism, but there are some. But I think that's just going to muddy the waters and overcomplicate the topic.
But see, and that is one thing I know from hearing conversations with people who are Hindus, that it it is much like the rest of the religions, where people are shaping. To me, if you want to go into something that I think is true, I think it is true that people are making it up as they go, and they're taking the
Okay, well,
parts that they
that's a
like.
second assertion. We haven't addressed your first assertion that there was a difference between religions. We haven't addressed. Do you want to switch it to this one?
No, we can keep on drilling on the first one, but the first one is, we're talking about like I there's no. I'm sorry. Restate it one more time.
Would you like to move on from there's a difference between religions to the most recent assertion that you made there? It's okay with me if you want to.
Um, yeah. I mean, either way, for me, really, we're trying. We're not going to get to the point to where there's a singular story.
Oh,
Is
okay.
where
Well,
did
I'd like to see
where
some
did that
evidence that
where
it's not a singular story.
where well where is that singular story? Where can you pinpoint out that singular story?
Okay. So here's why I think it's a singular story. Because there are literally thousands of points within the stories that are the same. That some of these peoples could not have shared it with community because they weren't part of the same landmass. Okay. And that if there are too many points that are the same and there's no points that aren't the same, then they are the same story. So I'm asking you to point out something that's different so we can establish at least one thing that is not the same.
Well, one, it is not true that we were
What?
stationary. We were not stationary. There's
I'm afraid that's not going to help the argument. Actually, let's grant everything that you said, that human beings got blown all over the place on vegetation mats that were raft-like, and they all told everybody the same story. That's okay. That doesn't make it untrue.
We're trying to get down to where we would know that it would be one story.
Mm-hmm.
And where is that one story?
You're asking me where the one story is?
Yes.
It's all over the whole planet. Slightly different colors and textures used to tell exactly the same story all over the planet to people who didn't know each other existed at any point. For instance, the human ending up in Australia to share this story when the Australians have no story at all anywhere of anyone ever arriving there until, I'm going to miss his name, until the big invasions happened. The stories of the dream time are much older than the invasions, but have all the same aspects that I find in the Bible.
See, you're taking and looking at all of these ancient texts, and there are differences in their story.
No, you're claiming there's difference.
I would agree,
though.
I would agree, though, that the stories have one thing in common, that being of supernatural claims.
No, they don't make supernatural claims. Religious people make supernatural claims. That's not the same thing at all. But if we could go back to the topic.
The stories themselves are the telling of supernatural events.
There's no necessity to look at those in that way, although it is popular. And I think your internet froze. No,
I'm thinking.
No,
I'm thinking.
Okay, that's fine. You just hold really still for a minute there, and it confused me.
Yeah, I really, I'm not a quick thinker. I will pause. I think
you're a serious thinker, and you take your time, and I admire that.
Thank you. But yeah, I would agree that there is. How can I say this to where we can both agree on it? That there is a God claim.
Okay, that's primary, sure.
In these ancient stories.
Sure. It's a little bit too general, though.
Well, I'm trying to get it nailed down to where.
Well, there's not only a God claim in all of the stories. There's also a claim of an echelon below that creator God, which are a certain count, and at some point they break down into two very, very important individuals who interact together to accomplish a certain goal, where huge, scary things happen to us, and we're taken off the planet and into heaven. And a Christian might say, oh, we don't believe in multiple gods. Really? Define an archangel for me. That's a demigod. How many demigods are in heaven? Well, according to the Bible, let's see. There's Lucifer and or Azazel who fell. He was a demigod. There is Gabriel, Michael, Uriel. I mean, there's a list. Are they going to say that's one God? No, they won't. They have a different term. Why is the different term important? Well, they're different languages from different people. Of course they have different terms. Is the description the same? Exactly. You could say archangel or Shiva, and you're in the same category.
I think there is some descriptive things that are very different between the archangel of like Michael or Shiva. Shiva was
really? Would you like to name a difference?
six-armed person, and the archangel is a winged angel.
How many wings?
Generally, wings come in pairs.
You know, seraphim have 6 wings, right?
No, I didn't know.
Okay, you can look it up and double check me if you want. But overprotected atheist answered while I was answering it simultaneously, so I think they couldn't have cheated. I mean, the more you break down the stories, the more they're the same. They don't become more different by breaking them down. And in fact, Matt Dillahunty is objectively wrong when he takes advantage of Christian pride. When he makes the statement, well, they can't all be right, now can they? Actually, yes, they can all be right. And maybe the difference, Mr. Dillahunty, or anyone else who wants to make such an outrageously uninformed claim, maybe the difference is you don't understand all of those societal norms and ideal systems. Maybe that's the difference between the religions. Your lack of familiarity with other societies around the planet.
Well, if I'm speaking about myself, there is much I don't know of all of the religions.
Well, that's most of us. That's okay.
Where it doesn't, I see no interaction, though. I see none of the claims, happening. There's parts of the stories that just do not work by the environmental pressures that we're under. Kind of like what y'all were talking about on your sister's channel the other night, you and Stool and Khalil, about the winged horse. I would have taken a position that no, it is impossible for the horse, because if we're talking about planets that are similar to ours, that have the same environmental pressures, a horse with wings is impossible because of the weight of a horse and how a wingspan works. The environmental pressures have never produced. It is something that is not. It is something that cannot be. It is impossible.
Let me go ahead and grant all of the new synthesis in synthetic Darwinistic evolution. I'll grant all of that. Okay, right now, for now, I don't really believe it, but I'll grant it for this argument. When you say an Earth cannot produce a winged horse, and that's unless I'm understanding you wrong, correct me now if I am.
No, that is what I'm saying. I'm saying our Earth
in that you
that.
have to assume that any other Earth-like planet would be precisely this planet. Are you willing to say that?
Any Earth-like planet, like ours, would not be able to produce.
Well, you just defined it as exactly the same. What I asked you is, if there were other Earth-like planets, is there any necessity that they would have to have exactly these environmental pressures? Or could it be different?
No, I would think there are differences, but if we're talking about a planet that is similar to ours, we're talking about H2O and carbon, that yes, that the environmental pressures would not produce an animal like a horse and would have wings.
Well, I think then you're arguing with Richard Dawkins. You're also arguing with, oh my gosh, Aaron Ra, and you're simultaneously arguing with Darwinism and the evolution of the planet itself, where everyone else that I've ever heard talk about this, except for you, has said if we ran evolution backwards to its beginning and started it over, you'd end up with completely different animals on this Earth.
I don't. Okay.
I'm just saying it's not a safe assertion to say that a Earth-like planet could never produce a winged horse. I just think that's going way too far.
I could say that for our planet, that it is.
Well, that's apparently true on this planet.
Yeah, it is not produced one. So it makes me think that it's even more likely that it would not be possible in another planet that is similar to ours. The environmental pressures don't.
I'm going to suggest that you might have been a little bit hasty, and I would even suggest that you might go look into that a little bit.
All right.
Okay. But I mean, I'm enjoying the conversation. But okay, so in summation of my point, I think that it's simpler to have a singular source of information which spread in the first argument, which was spread by a singular mind to all existent people on the planet, rather than people independently came up with the same story of the same complexity, it being highly complex, or that they all managed to share it with each other communally when they didn't know each other existed, and the chances of them adopting someone else's ideas, systems, society, and religion was actually quite low without having some kind of commonality, at least in landmass or food sources.
It's just not something that is. All of the cultures have been influenced by other cultures. There has been.
That's not true. Until there was transportation, that is just not possible.
We have legs. We're moving. There is many of us who were.
You can be a moving person. You can be a moving person. You can be a running person, but you're going to need to be a large ocean-going vessel person to accomplish some of what you just said.
That's the Vikings were moving from up there, the Iceland, Greenland area, and moving over here on
where's that located?
Small boats.
Where is the Iceland, Greenland area located compared to the United States?
It would be northeastern.
So mostly north and eastern.
Yes.
How wide is the deepest thing, or how wide is the widest body of water they had to cross to accomplish that?
Well, that all depends on what route there's many of them doing it.
In the route that scholars think they most often used, what was the widest body of water? 10,000 miles?
I don't know.
5,000. 1,000. 100. 50. They didn't cross any oceans to do what you just described. And by the way, it's one of the better examples, what you just described, of people taking a bigger boat and really traveling far. That was one of the better examples.
Well, I'm just saying that there wasn't a single. I'm not sure how we would get to know that there would be a single story.
By lack of differences. That's how you would know it's a single story, by lacking difference.
Yeah. But there are many differences.
I'd like you to point one out.
Okay, I'll think of another one that is different. The difference between... Okay. The Abrahamic religion has Muhammad as the prophet, as their person who is the person. And then you have the Christians who think Jesus is the Savior, who is the one with their message. Those two are different in the stories.
Okay. Would you like to describe how they're different more than that? Or is that good enough for you?
We can take it from there. I mean...
Okay. In Islam, who enters heaven first?
I don't know.
Muhammad. In Christianity, who enters heaven first?
Well, okay. Who enters heaven first? How would we know?
Off this planet. It makes an assertion.
No, that
the story makes an assertion. You don't have to say it's true.
Entering of heaven, and the interpretation of the Christian religion is interpreted in different ways. And
now, certainly, you're not going to expect me to defend all of scholarship of all the linguists of the past. You're not going to ask me to defend that.
God is the one who would be in their story the first to be in heaven, because
no, that's not true. No, that would be a description of the one who was always in heaven. That's not the same thing. I said, who enters heaven first?
I don't know.
Jesus. So in the story of the Quran,
how do you know that to be true? How do you know?
It's not about whether or not it's true. You said there's differences between the stories. That's called an internal critique and comparison between stories. That's what I'm giving you.
But in order to be able to critique these stories, you would have to be able to know how to tell the differences between them.
It's your job it's your assertion that there are differences. You're supposed to provide me differences. My job is to try to justify that there are no differences. That's what I'm doing.
Right. Yes. I
Okay.
get that.
Okay. Are you aware that in the Quran that Muhammad is described as the last prophet of God?
From my understanding of it, yes.
Okay. In the Bible, who's described as the last prophet of God?
I mean, I guess what you're trying to get at is it would be Jesus would be the last prophet, but was Jesus a prophet,
Oh,
or
I'm not
was
near
he
being
not?
done. Yes, according to the Bible, Jesus is the last prophet and the prophet of God, both. I was going to go to that one next.
Okay.
But there's no end to the overlap. Unless you know of some difference between Muhammad and Christ that I don't know about.
One was hung on a cross and one was not.
So there's something in the Quran that says that Muhammad was not hung on a cross.
The Quran does not have a story of Muhammad being hung on a cross.
So those things, the death is incomparable. You can't make a statement that they're different or the same.
They are different because they are not comparable, because
No.
Jesus dies on a cross and Muhammad does not.
What is the story of Muhammad's death then?
I think it has something to do with that horse that we were talking about earlier.
No, it does not.
Richard, I need a break. I need to be able to go to the restroom.
Well, that's okay. We've already done an hour and a half, and I appreciate it, man. I mean, that's a long show. That's already been an hour and a half, bro. We should just go ahead and wrap it up and let you go pee. And I need a cigarette anyway.
Right on. Are we doing one of those after parties, or is this where we're saying goodbye?
Well, I don't know. I'd like to make this like a weekly thing with you, as I said before. What do you think about doing that? I'm not really into after parties. It seems that, although I think I should do an open show pretty soon. I should invite all you guys in the side chat and yourself as well, Tobin. And I tell you what, I'm gonna do an open hangout and just link it all over the place. And if you guys are subscribed or you hit that little bell, then you're going to know about it. And you're welcome to come in and just troubleshoot me all you like. How's that?
All right. Yeah, and as far as
I'm gonna do that tomorrow night. Okay, but I'd love to do a weekly show with you, Tobin. You're a real nice guy. You're a reasonable guy. You're a guy who doesn't take these things lightly. You don't make stupid jokes about it, and I appreciate that.
Likewise. I enjoyed the conversation we're having as well. Definitely.
So peace and respect to you, first of all, Tobin, and also Ox, Wild Heart, Overprotected. Oh my gosh, Nerdy Rodent. I see. Who else did I see? Early on, oh, B, my baby sister, my Schweeze, and Harmonica Man, Jamie Russell, BigZebra.com, and a couple of, and I'm probably missing a couple of guys. And I'm sorry if Gary, if I missed anybody, I apologize, but I don't want to bore you guys with it. But thank you. I appreciate anyone who watched, anyone who might watch in the future. I really appreciate it. Tobin, do you have anything you want to promote right now about your channel? Something you want to show you got going on somebody else's channel or anything like that at all?
Just look out, once a week I put out a new song. I'm getting close to the end of the Truth Claims album. I got 3 more to put out, so the next 3 weeks there'll be one song put out. Yeah, so look out for that
Are you,
and come jam out with me.
are you like writing a song once a month? Is that what you're telling me?
I write these songs once. I do it in a week.
You write a song in a, okay, that's insane to me. I have all the creativity of a doorknob. So that sounds amazing to me. But thank you so much for the show, guys. Check out his channel. It will be linked later in the description. If you're watching this not today, on the day of recording, I'm going to have his channel in the description of the video. Please go and check him out, like and subscribe to his channel, and look for his alerts, because he's doing original music. And dude, there's a lot of music out there. And if you do something original, that's really creative and impressive to me personally. And I hope you guys will check out his channel. Thanks to everyone in the side chat, anyone who might watch this in the future. Special thanks to Tobin. Please come back and we'll continue the conversation. And until we do, I want all of you to know that I truly do look forward to the day. I deeply look forward to the day that we're all great friends. And until next time, peace and respect to you all.